So the first thing to look at is just how your squat feels. So we can have, I'm not going to go through specifics of squat, I just want you to squat naturally as your body feels comfortable doing. And as you're squatting, notice what's going on in the body, whether the feet move a lot, do they spin out, do the knees cave in, does the upper body round over, can we keep the chest up? And just start to go through a few repetitions and take note of anything funky that might be going on. So in the squat, we want our knees to track our toes. And as we initiate the squat, we want to be thinking about leading with the hips first and allowing the legs to bend rather than leading with the knees first. The knees can track over the toes, but we want to lead with the hips first. Okay, and then we're looking at that chest position as well. So as I've gone down, have I gone into the bottom and do I really round and flex through the whole spine, or can I keep my body upright without my bum tucking under excessively and without this rounding through the upper body? And just take note of those movements. The other thing you might want to test is a Cossack, which is just relative to you. You don't have to test this one. Maybe it's something you're working on. Notice how the ankle feels. I've got an elevated platform in here tonight, so I can use a box or you can use a chair, and maybe you're up here. Okay, so you can elevate it and work your way down to the floor over time. The other movement, the last movement, and don't feel like you have to test this one, guys, but it could be a pistol squat. So you can sit down into a narrow squat, and this might be as far as you can go, and you might already feel like you're falling backwards, okay? And then maybe see, can I extend one leg out in front and maintain that base position? What's limiting me to make that inaccessible? Most likely, a lot of the time, that's going to be the ankle. If the ankle isn't able to dorsiflex enough, your knee won't be able to travel far enough over the toes, and that will block the hips from getting low enough as well. And a lot of the time it will start from the base. So a lot of the work you've done with me in the past as well has been a lot of foot or ankle or toe mobility. So first thing we'll start with is from the base, working our way up, toe cars, and just if you sit down to start with for this one, we can stand up as well. I want you to give your feet a little bit of a massage. So use your thumbs, massage into the soles of your feet. Should feel quite nice, this bit. Just work into the sole of the foot, all along that line from the big toe. So work your way from the base of the big toe all the way through the sole of the foot there. Find any areas that might feel a bit tight. We're going to create some space between the toes. You can continue to massage if you need a bit more of that. Otherwise, I'm going to use my fingers, but you can use a sock or a bit of cloth. And with that bit of cloth, you can thread it through each toe. Otherwise, I'm just going to use my fingers and place my fingers between my toes. Okay, and once I've done that, I'm now creating some space in there in my feet. Make sure wherever you're sat, it's comfortable, okay? You don't want to be feeling tension elsewhere in the body. So if you need to sit up on top of a platform, for example, or on some cushions, you can. Maybe this other leg straightens out to the side, whatever feels better. And now all I'm going to do is see, can I pick this foot up and just make some circles with the ankle? So I've still got my fingers between my toes, or that sock or bit of cloth between my toes. And that's a really good thing that you could try doing a bit more of. You might have seen toe spacers before, but honestly, after a long day, if you just get in from work, for example, get like a bit of cloth, or like I said, a sock, and just wind it between your toes and leave that on for a couple of hours, if not more, and just create some space in the feet, get those toe joints working and not so sort of squished together like the sort of shoes that we wear all day tends to have that effect. Okay, you can release that side. Should feel quite nice in the foot really after that. And then we'll do the same on the other side. So start off with a little bit of a massage. Just use the thumbs, massage into the sole of your foot. Find anywhere that feels a bit tight. You can add some sort of pressure points by really pressing deeply into one part of the foot and then moving the thumbs a little bit further down and again pressing in. You might press for 5-10 seconds and then release. And then when you're ready to, do the same on this side. So threading your fingers or a bit of cloth between your toes. Create some space. And you can just hold it there, or you can add these circles at the ankle as well, so picking up that leg. Okay, you can release on that side as well. So just notice how that feels. It should feel nice. I hope it feels nice. We'll go into a bit of strength work now for your toes to work those intrinsic muscles in the feet. And you can do this sat down. You can test it sitting on a chair. You can do it standing. So play with all sort of variations and see what works best for you. The first one is, if I use my hands first to make it easier, I'm just going to place my fingers on top of my little toes. And my big toe, I'm not pressing onto that, I'm going to leave that alone. As I push down into those little toes, I'm going to tell my big toe to lift up and really pull up as hard as possible. So I've lifted my big toes up, and my aim here is to lift and lift and lift. You should start to feel more heat and muscle activation as you're pulling them up as hard as possible. From there, I'm going to lower it back down. And now I'm going to place my hands on top of my big toes and do the same, but on the other side of the foot. So I'm going to lift the little toes up and push the big toe down into the mat. And just build in the tension in your body gradually. So if you think of it in terms of percentage, you might be working at 30 to 50% tension and gradually working up towards 100. And what I mean by that is, that activation or the active movement of me lifting the toes, I'm starting to work it harder and deeper and adding more tension that way, and that's where that percentage can increase. I don't want you to go into full-on cramp straight away, okay? So alternate between those two movements. I want you to press down on the little toes, lift the big toes up, and hold that for about 10 seconds, and then lower the big toes and lift the little toes up and hold that for about 10 seconds. So we've done that sat. You can also try it standing, but you can stay where you are if you're comfortable there. You should be feeling quite a lot of heat building into the lower leg as well. You might even feel the muscles in the shin engaging. I'm going to lift and pull that toe up as hard as I can, and then alternate. And this is one of the best movements I think that you can do in terms of working on that intrinsic foot strength, but helping to improve your ankle mobility. Because if you think about the sorts of things we wear on our feet all day, they do get squished and tight and everything stops working properly. So once you've done a few rounds of that, I'll give you one more challenge with the toe curl work. And that is to lift all of your toes up, spread them apart like you would with your fingers. And then you're going to press your little toe down into the mat, then the next one, and work your way up towards that big toe. Then we'll reverse it, lift the big toe, and then try to isolate one toe at a time. You might really have to concentrate to be able to isolate those toes. And just keep moving up and down roughly 5-10 times. Just go through enough to build some heat into your feet. Don't worry so much about repetition. You can also use your hands to help with this one. This can be particularly difficult to obviously isolate one at a time, so don't worry if they don't do it perfectly. You can use your hands, so I can place my hands down on top of all of my toes except for my baby toe. Tell that toe to lift, then release the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and the big toe, okay? Working my way out from there to the little toe. Just have a play with trying to isolate one at a time. And obviously if I'm leaning right back as I am right now, it's probably going to make that feel a bit easier as well than if I'm loading over that joint more. So you can also try that standing and just see if you feel any difference. Just working on building that mind-body connection and hopefully feeling a fair bit of heat in your feet now as well. Okay, just go for one more and then we're going to sit back down and look at strengthening our anterior tib, which is important to build strength in that part of the leg, which will help aid in dorsiflexion, but also helps injury prevention too. And for this one, I'm going to make it nice and easy and just sit on the ground, lift my feet up, so pull my ankles into dorsiflexion, and then lower and lift and lower. And you can do this standing as well with your hands against the wall. Just thought I'd go through this version with you tonight. So as I lift up, I'm trying to close that angle, that gap between the top of my foot and the shin. And you should feel some heat building up here on the front of the shin. If you're not feeling anything at all, it might be worth checking to see how tight your calf muscles feel as well. Working those opposing muscles, and you can give the calves a bit of a stretch out, or even roll them, use your fist and just roll into them, or use your thumbs to massage them a bit and just see if that helps. But as I lift my feet up, I'm going to add some pauses here for like 5 seconds as an isometric. Then I'm going to lower down. I'm going to increase the tension I build in my body by trying to lift more and more and more and more. And obviously it's probably not moving any further, but you've got the intention there and you can feel that isometric contraction heating up. So we want to get lots of volume of these in. You're looking at about 20 to 30 repetitions. Don't worry if you've no idea how many you've done. Let's just go until you feel lots of heat. And for those of you that might not be feeling it, a great way to get into your calves, it's a great way, but it's also quite a painful way, is from a kneeling position. I'm going to take my shin across the calf on the opposite side. Okay, so I can go sort of tabletop, take the shin across, and then I can put as much or as little tension, weight, not tension, I can put as much as weight through that leg as I want. So I can make it really easy to begin with, just be gentle and just massage around onto that muscle. You can move side to side. And I'm sure somewhere this is called something like a bone saw, which makes sense. Using your shin bone to saw across the leg. It doesn't feel the most pleasant, but is a great way to just get a bit of SMR in as well. I don't tend to really do any foam rolling, to be honest, but if you do feel a lot of tension here or any knots, it could be a good way to just loosen something off so that you can feel the muscle activation that you're trying to feel if it's stopping you from feeling it. So change onto the other leg if you're doing this one with me. Otherwise, stick with those anterior tib raises. And you might find some nasty bits, spend a bit more time on those. You can even send your bum back towards your heels and load it even further. Okay, and then if you were doing that because you were struggling to feel the shin, then you can retest it and see if that's made any change. Just obviously, we've only spent a minute or so per side on that, so you probably or may not feel a lot of change, but it's a tool you could use in future. If you can ever motivate yourself to do that one, that is. So hopefully we've got lots of volume into the shins. Another variation of that, which I'll just show you before we move on, is to stand with your back against the wall, or your bum against the wall. Your back doesn't actually have to be against the wall, it can come off. And my feet can be really close to the wall to start with, and all we're going to do is lift the tops of my feet up from here, and then lower, lift, and lower. And to make this more challenging, I take the feet further away. And to challenge it further, I add more time under tension. So as I lift up, I might hold here for 2 seconds, gradually over time, maybe hold it for 5 seconds for each rep. And you should start to feel a lot of heat on these. If you're not feeling any heat by, say, 15 repetitions here, you're making it too easy and you need to be challenging the distance that you're going at. But we want that isometric time under tension, okay? So feel free to try that one. We're also going to move just into a bit more ankle dorsiflexion before we move up to the hips. And for this one, we're going to do ankle sequence with a little bit of an ankle dorsiflexion loaded movement as well. So if you start with your toes hooked, you can lift your heels right up, bring the hands to the ground and just lower your knees, and we're sat with our bum on the heels, getting a super deep stretch into the soles of your feet. I want you to push down through the toe joints. So really grip the toes into the mat and push them into the floor. Feel a deep stretch there. And if this feels too much already, it's probably something you want to start to implement more frequently, like daily, and just build it up gradually. Even if you can only manage sort of 10 seconds to start with, that's fine. From here, we'll unhook. And we're now in plantar flexion. So notice what this position feels like. And hopefully you can get your bum to your heels, but if you can't, a progression towards that would be to start with maybe a cushion or two under your bum, gradually work your way down, get the knees used to being in that deeply flexed position. And then from here, I want you to lift one knee up, the other, maybe both. And just stretch even deeper. This might feel too much, so you can stay here if that's the case. We're now going to move back into the toe hook. So we hook the toes, sit back. And from this position, I'm going to pull myself into a squat. Don't force your heels down unless you want to try. You might roll backwards, but that's okay. I'm going to grip and lift my knees off the mat. Maybe my heels are up here for now. Maybe I can work them down if my ankles allow it. So we did that anterior tib work a minute ago. While you're in this squat position, I want you to think about feeling that heat on the front of your shin, because that heat in the front of my shin is helping me to pull my knees forward whilst the ankles are in that deep flex position. And that will help in terms of your ankle mobility massively than if you kind of sit here without any intention. So I want that intention to be fire up those shins. Okay, lift your heels up and we'll go back to the floor again. So this time, see if you can do it without your hands. But if that's too much, bring them down because I don't want you to slam your knees into the ground. So I'm going to grip with the toes, open the hips and take the knees to the floor. Unhook. And from there I can lift, stretch out the tops of the feet as well. Okay, we'll go once more back into a squat and then we'll be coming back to this position here to work a little bit more into ankle dorsiflexion. So let's go back to the toe hook, grip down and pull yourself back into that squat. Nice and slow and controlled. Sitting in that deep squat, just getting those heels to where they will go. If any of you have sort of fractional plates or books or anything, you can place them under the heels. Otherwise, don't worry about it, just go to where you can. We're now going back up, last one, lower the knees down, with or without your hands, and release. We're going to bring one foot up, so I'm in a half kneeling position. And I'm going to show you two variations because this one might feel too intense, okay? So for this variation, I'm half kneeling, I'm going to place my hands on top of my thigh. And then the aim here is to get my knee to travel as far over my toes as possible. So I'm going to use some load from my upper body to help take that knee over the toes without my heel lifting. And I can stay here and I can kind of move around a little bit. I'm going to do 2 minutes each side. So if this variation sat feels brutal, then I want you to elevate your leg and take the knee forward over the toes on an elevated platform. You'll also get quite a nice hip flexor stretch at the same time. Okay, so we've got 2 minutes here and I'm going to give you some tools to play with while we're in this position. So to start with, we're just opening up some space, moving around in it, seeing how it feels, getting that knee as far forward as we can. And now what I want you to do is take that knee over the toes with the intention of pressing the front of your foot hard down into the floor. The heel stays connected to the ground, so the heel shouldn't lift, but I'm pressing the front of my foot down hard into the ground as I let the knee to travel over the toes. So I'm pushing it down maybe for 5 to 10 seconds and then I'm going to release, come up again, and now I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm still in that position with the knee over the toes, but this time I'm going to try and close this angle between the top of my foot and my shin, having the intention of lifting the front of my foot up towards my shin as the knee travels forward. So the front of your foot won't actually come off the floor, but I want you to have the intention of pulling it up. And that's where we're going to feel that anterior tib again. You should be feeling that shin absolutely firing up. You want to hold this for 5 to 10 seconds and then release again. And then just keep alternating between those two movements. So pushing down as an isometric and releasing, and then pulling up as an isometric. We've got another 30 seconds, okay? So sort of one more of each. Push down as hard as you can. And then pulling up as the knee's traveling over the toes. You can always, in the future, add load to this as well. But you can probably, if you're feeling it like I am, you don't need to add any load. It can feel tough enough as it is. Okay, switch to the other side. Feel free to do a little retest in between to just see if one ankle feels way more open than the other, and just see if that's affected your squat more positively. And then we'll do 2 minutes on the other side as well. So that can be your normal squat, narrow squat, pistol squat, or Cossack. And just see how that's feeling. And then when you're ready, guys, onto the other leg. Okay, set yourself up. So maybe you're on that elevated platform, otherwise you might be on the floor. 2 minutes from now, so taking that knee over the toes, adding some load into it first. You're gonna start by just opening up some space, and then in sort of 30 odd seconds or so, start those isometric holds. But to begin with, just move into it and try and actually open up a bit of space first. And then when you're ready, getting that knee to travel over the toes, the first one is to push the foot down into the ground as hard as you can, whilst keeping the heel connected to the mat. Hold that for 5 to 10 seconds, then release, and then switch by lifting it up, focusing on the engagement in the shin, trying to close that angle, pulling the front of your foot up towards the shin as hard as possible. 5 to 10 seconds there. Again, move around, just keep alternating between the two. Got 1 more minute. And this is just helping us to engage the structures in the lower leg. So as you're pushing the foot down into the floor, that's where we're going to be using those muscles on the back of the leg more, so the calves. As we're pulling up, we're using the muscles on the front of the shin. Another 10 seconds. Okay, you can come up whenever you're ready, shake the legs out a bit. It can feel pretty intense, a lot of ankle work there. So retest your squat again and just see how it's feeling. Hopefully we might just be feeling a little bit of improvement, hopefully a bit lighter in the ankles. Notice if the hips are still talking to you, but see if we can get those knees further forward over the toes, which will allow the hips to come deeper anyway. So if my knee can't travel forward, if I go into a squat like this, and you might be experiencing this as you squat, if I go back with the hips, but now my knees won't move forward, you can see how I'm now stuck and I can't get any deeper because my knee isn't traveling ahead. As soon as my knee can travel ahead, my hips can come down more. A lot of the time that is from the ankle, so it's just things to be aware of. What we're going to move into is some hip cars. Okay, so this is where we're really working on the hip rotation. As I said before, your hips need to be able to rotate. We're going to start holding on to something. Okay, I'm going to stand on one leg. You can use a wall, hold on to anything for your balance. And whilst we're here, we're going to look at how effective or how much strength have we got in our hip flexors. So for this first one, I can do it free space or holding on. I'm going to draw my knee up into my chest. Okay, if I show you from the side so you can see, I'm going to lift it up. Bottom leg is straight. I can actually hold onto the shin and pull it all the way in and see how that feels. And now the challenge is, if I let go, can I hold my knee there without it dropping, or does it drop? Okay, and this is a little test for your hip flexor strength. And if you're finding that you've pulled it up, bottom leg straight, and you can hold it there, no drama, strength probably isn't the issue, and you might need to be stretching those hip flexors a bit more if you're finding they feel really tight. But obviously, if my knee drops when I let go, most likely that's going to be a strength issue that you need to be working on. That could be why you're suffering with what feels like tight hips when actually they probably need more strength. Okay, so it's just a little test or tool to note and play around with to work on your progression. And every now and again, retest that, not tonight, but going forward with your training and see if that improves. Good one for your hip flexor test. So now with that in mind, I'm going to lift my knee up. I'm going to open it out, and as I open it out, the opposite hip bone wants to point forwards. So notice if the whole body starts to rotate. Try to keep that hip bone forwards. And I'm going to internally rotate my hip, trying not to let my knee drop. Okay? If your knee starts to drop a bit, what you can do is lean over to the side to try and lift it up higher, and then try to lift the upper body up a bit more. Okay, and that can be a way to test that out. I'm now going to go into hip extension. Feel the glutes fire up. Really squeeze your butt and lower the leg to the floor. Okay, that's half a rep. So go back the other way. Back into hip extension where the knee is behind the center line of your body. Try not to lean forward, keep the body up. Circle out to the side. Feeling that outer hip fire up. Externally rotate your hip. Bring it forwards into that hip flexion and lower it down. Awesome. So it's a good point to note that everyone's bodies are going to move a bit differently. And if you're not used to doing this sort of thing, your hip might be more here, here, here. Okay, it's not wrong. So don't worry if you can't get your leg all the way up here. I would say work on this every day if you can. It might just be a few rotations per side every day, and that's going to help your hips feel healthier and happier. So we're going to go on to the other side. So you can hold on to something or you can try it in the free space. But if you're in the free space, we're trying not to wobble about because that will defeat the point of it as well. So let's go up into hip flexion, straighten the bottom leg. I can squeeze my fists out to the side if I'm in the free space. Breathe through your nose. So we're using the diaphragm, and then let's take that leg. And they do build a lot of heat into the hips, but it's a great movement that you can do to work on improving that rotation. We'll go back onto the other side again. So a few more per side, guys. I want you to challenge these up as we move through, and you can challenge them up in a number of different ways. It might be that perhaps you're not holding on to something anymore, and we're working on that single leg stability as well. It might be the adding pauses and end range. So when we went into that hip flex position, you now might be really lifting that leg up as actively as you can in every part of the movement and just holding it for an extra couple of seconds. And that's how you can start to increase that time under tension and challenge it. I'm literally on fire. I shouldn't be wearing a jumper. So that's how you should be feeling. Okay, so let's go again. If you're feeling a little bit crampy, being on the verge of cramp is not a bad thing. Going into full cramp, we've probably pushed it too hard too soon. So take it back a bit, okay? I'll stop talking now, let's move. So let's go up with the leg and out. Internally rotate the hip, trying to keep that knee up, focusing on that outer hip engaging. Take it back into hip extension, squeeze the glutes. And lower, and then back. Hip extension. Keep breathing through your nose, out to the side, really lifting that hip as hard as possible. Externally rotate it. Whee! Bring it forwards, pulling that knee in as much as you can. And down, shake out. Shoulders get tired as well. and then back onto the other side. Lift it up. Breathe through your nose, fill up the lungs. Take that leg out, keeping the foot flexed. Internally rotate the hip, try not to let that knee drop as much as possible. Take it back and lower and reverse. Nice and slow. Bring it forwards and lower it down. Have a little breather in between before we go again. So feel free to retest movements or just rest, maybe have a drink. Each time now, I'm going to give you another challenge in the next set or two where we can look at lengthening our limbs out a bit more, which will challenge our hip flexors more, our abductors, and so on. So we'll try it on this one, but you might feel like you're only ready for it on the last one, so that's fine. So for this next one, I'm going to lift the leg up and see if I can straighten it out. So I'm going to lift the knee in as high as I can. Bottom leg stays straight. See if I can extend that leg out in front of me. Now you can see my dirty feet. Okay. And then you might just go sort of here and back. So just challenging that range to where you can get it to. But notice if this bottom leg bends, keep standing nice and tall. Okay, I won't leave you there. Let's go out. Internally rotate the hip, and now trying to extend the leg out to the side. And again, that might just be partial range or tiny little extension and flexion. Okay, we'll go back into extension here. Woo, I'm falling over. Squeeze the glutes. Another point in this position, so you can hold that, stay where you are, guys. I want you to feel that heat burning up in your glutes. In this position, notice if this happens with your back, okay? Try to draw the lower ribs in and down and focus on the glute activating. It's like when you see a load of people do those banded glute kickbacks and it's just like a little booty popping session. That's not what we're trying to do. I want to feel the glute, not the lower back, okay? So from there, we've lowered and then reverse it. Engage the glute, keep the lower ribs down, out to the side, maybe extend it. Bring it in, externally rotate the hip, bring it forwards, extend again, bring it in and rest. Well done, I left you for a long time on a couple of those. Burning up. Okay, onto the other side. Let's add those extensions again. So you can hold the wall or squeeze the fist. And if we're squeezing the fist, what we're doing is irradiating through the body. So you're trying to build in some full body tension. That's going to help you control the hip joint specifically, rather than kind of flop about all over the place or compensate, okay? Just in case you weren't sure why we were doing that. So squeeze the fist, draw the knee up, maybe extend the leg, test it out, see how it feels, maybe just partially. Take it out. Internally rotate. Try and extend again. We'll go back into extension, feeling the glutes on, pulling those lower ribs down. Also probably feel the hamstrings too. Lower and then reverse. Take it back. Out to the side. Extend. Keep lifting that upper body up as much as you can. Externally rotate. Bring it forwards. Extend. Bring it in and lower it down and shake your legs out. Hopefully you're doing okay, guys. Absolutely sweltering in here. Have a drink if you need a drink. So what we're actually going to do is move on from that, and we'll go into a couple of other movements. We're going to look at some strength in the hips. One, it's another variation of hip cars. This is a bear sit transition. So we're going to sit down. This doesn't mean it'll be easier. You can make it just as challenging as those last ones. From this seated position, we're going to test out 90-90 positions. Again, this is all about rotations. This is another tool you can use to improve your hip rotation. What we're going to start with is having feet wide and then just allow the legs to open up into a 90-90 shape. If you sit here and immediately go into cramp in this back hip, being internally rotated, or it feels so uncomfortable that you're falling back here, what you can actually do is bring your hands on the ground behind you for some support. You can also place some cushions underneath this front hip to prop you up, which will feel better. And then the final option is actually I can bring my knee and my foot closer together so it's not quite so 90-90. So test those variations if 90-90 feels way too much, okay? So to start with, I'm gonna make this nice and easy. Bring my hands behind, lean into the shoulders a bit. I'm gonna lift my back knee up and then lower it down. And again, lift it up and lower. And I want you to now focus on pushing this front leg, the hip, the knee, the ankle pushes down into the mat as the back leg lifts. So you're now feeling this sort of resistance between both sides. One opens, the other one's pushing down. We're now going to hold this leg here as I've lifted the knee up. I'm going to hold it. Keep pushing that front hip into the ground. Take a breath in through your nose. And then as you exhale, you're going to tell this leg to go even further. And you can breathe out of the mouth or the nose, whichever. Again, take another breath in. And then exhale. Find some more space. There's always more. When you physically can't move anywhere and you're completely stuck, that's where we transition, okay? So the idea is that we're pushing ourselves, working towards our end ranges, adding some holds and isometrics to build strength at those end ranges before we transition, okay? So it'll be different for everyone. Okay, so we're leaning into it. Nice and easy, just lift that back knee up and down. You can just do a couple of repetitions here. Then we'll start to build in that tension in the front leg. I'm telling that hip, knee and ankle to push down into the ground. You should feel some heat into the outer hip. And then I'm lifting this other knee away. So adding those rotations. And the next one, we're going to hold it there. So we lift it up, open that hip. Push the front leg into the mat. Take a breath in. Exhale, tell this back hip to open more. Again, take another breath in. And exhale, see if you can get any more. And then when you're stuck, transition to the other side. Okay, so we're going to do 2 more each side. And for these next options, you can make it a bit harder. But if that feels plenty enough for you at the minute with your hip mobility, then stay with that. If you want to challenge it a bit more, what I'm now going to do is sit up in the hips without my hands being on the floor, okay? And then the final option to make it even harder from there is I'm going to irradiate through my body. So I'm going to squeeze my fists, make sure I'm nasal breathing, so I'm using my diaphragm, and build a whole lot of tension into the whole body. Okay, so this is the final option to make it even harder, but otherwise don't squeeze the hands, don't fully irradiate, just have the hands off the floor, okay? So either of those. So I'm 90-90, I'm now going to push the front hip into the ground, lift the back knee. I'm just going to do that a couple of times. On this next one, I'm going to hold it. Keep pushing that front leg down into the ground. Take a breath in. And exhale, open the back hip. Take a breath in. And exhale, open the back hip. One more breath. Trying to find some more space. Keep working it. When you can't move anymore, then we'll transition. We're done. Over to the other side. Same again, so you can use the hands on the floor or without, or you can irradiate. Push the front hip into the ground, lift the back knee and just go through a couple of external rotations into that back hip. On the next one, we'll hold it there. Feel that outer hip firing up. Keep pushing the front hip into the ground. Inhale. Exhale, resist them away from each other. Inhale again. And exhale a bit more. And again. And exhale. Really trying to open those hips. And then transition. Well done. Once more each side. So final option was to really focus on building some heat into the whole body and irradiate by squeezing the fists. And if you're still not sure what I mean by this, guys, just a little test. If I squeeze my hands sort of gently, you can just feel the hand engage. You can feel those muscles in the hand firing up. If I squeeze a bit harder, you'll notice that travels up the forearm. If I squeeze harder again, you'll feel it traveling up the arm into the shoulder. And the idea of this is that I'm trying to recruit more muscles and more tension in the body so that I can really work and push those end ranges and build more strength, but without compensating from elsewhere. So you're in charge of how much tension you build in. As a guide, from what I said before, you might be 30%, 50%, gradually building up to 100. But I wouldn't recommend going full on 100% if you've not really done this before. Okay, so start easy, sort of 30 to 50. Squeeze the fist, push the front leg into the ground, lift the back knee. We'll do 3 lifts. Focusing on that outer hip. On the 3rd one, hold it there. Pressing that front hip into the ground, take a breath in. And exhale, open it up. Another breath in. And exhale, open it up. See if you can do one more. And open a bit more, really feeling that heat into the hips, then transition. And obviously you can still have your hands on the floor behind you, okay? This is just an option. Last one, guys. Squeeze the fists, building that irradiation, press the front hip into the mat, lift the back knee 3 times. On your 3rd one, you're gonna hold it. Take a breath in. And exhale, open. Another breath in. And exhale some more. One more, keep resisting those hips away. The front leg still pushes down. And exhale, open. And then transition, shake them out. We can sit with the legs straight and you can just turn the feet in and out, nice and easy rotation, or gentle rotations this way. Okay, we're gonna move into more pancake work from here tonight. So test your squat and see how that feels. You can also test your other movements like your pistol or your Cossack, whichever movements you tested at the beginning. And just see how that's feeling, see if we can get a little bit deeper. Notice where the chest is. Remember, if you know your ankles are limited and they're stopping you being able to sit down in your squat, then you can lift the heels slightly or place a book under each heel. Over time, your intention is to gradually take that heel lift away, but to bridge those gaps initially, you may need that heel lift for a while. You might need to use something under your heels rather than trying to, it's like, you can't go from sort of 0 to 100 straight away. You're not going to just be able to bridge that gap instantly. It's going to take lots of time and practice. So spending more time sort of sat in squats or deep lunge positions, or some of that ankle work, maybe with that heel lift, over time it will improve, but you just have to be consistent with it. So I'm going to take you into pancakes. The first thing we're going to look at is the good morning, and this is going to be important to get the hinge correct first before we challenge the movement. And simply, I want you to stand with your feet under your hips, so just hip width stance. And if you've ever done deadlifts or good mornings before, you're probably familiar with this movement pattern. I want to keep my spine neutral and instead just hinge at the hip. So I'm going to push my bum back as I hinge and then come up. And you should start to feel the hamstrings on the back of the thighs, okay? As you push your bum back, take a little look at your shins. Your knees should be directly above your ankles. They shouldn't travel forward now, because if they do, this will become more quad dominant, and instead I want this to be hamstring dominant, okay? So bum pushes back, we hinge over, and then we stand up. If you're struggling to do this without this happening, okay, if your back's just rounding and the knees are bending like this or traveling forward, then what you can do is stand with your bum just a little bit away from a wall, and all I want you to try and do is find the wall with just your butt, okay? And this can help just teach that movement pattern. You can come a little bit further away, you can add that bend in the knee, okay? So it's another variation to play with that hinge or that good morning pattern. So we can do this in loads of different foot positions. This one is going to be more relative to working on my hamstrings for my narrow stance or my forward folds. Then if I go wider, this is now more relative to my pancake, okay? I can also do it split stance, so give this one a go too. If I've got the back knee bent, front leg can stay straight, and I can actually work into single leg good mornings. This version is a bit easier than, say, if I lift my back foot off the floor. This is now way more challenging in terms of strength and balance and proprioception. But you could start with, say, this version to work into that hamstring flexibility, and over time challenge standing on one leg, almost like your warrior 3 position in yoga, if those of you here that do yoga, okay, and standing up from there. So test those 2 movements out. Aim for about 5 to 10 of these single leg good mornings with that back foot as an assist. Do 5 to 10 each leg. And then when you've done that, aim to see if you can do roughly 3 reps per side of single leg hinges. The standing leg can have a slight bend in the knee, but see if you can do it straight, obviously not forcing it locked out straight, okay? And as I do this one, you don't have to be able to go all the way down, it might just be to here. And you should feel, as you're standing up, a deep engagement or a deep burn in the back of your thighs, and that is your hamstrings, okay? So play with those 2 single leg variations. 5 to 10 reps on this one, 3 reps on this one per side. See sort of how low you can go without the hips rotating. So notice this isn't happening. Okay, that's more like half moon in yoga. What I want is keeping the hips level. Internally rotate your back thigh, that will help. Go to where you can, stand back up, use the strength in that leg to come up. Once you've tested those each side, that's a great tool you can use to work on your hamstring flexibility, building strength in that range, which is super important, that we don't just want to stretch stuff, we want to strengthen it. Okay, and then when you're ready, guys, we'll move on to our wide leg stance, which is now working towards our pancake. And it's exactly the same. I'm going to have my big toes slightly turned in. Wide is relative. So go for a wide stance that feel like you feel comfortable enough in. Bring your hands to your hips, push your bum back, hinge and come up. Squeeze your glutes to extend your hips. I'll go from the side so you can see from here. So bum pushes back, spine stays neutral, squeeze the glutes to extend the hips. And now perhaps I can go a little bit deeper. Once again, should be feeling the hamstrings. While I hinge over, I'm going to pull up on the quadricep muscles. So the muscles on the front of the thigh are now going to pull up and engage. Okay, and that's going to help the hamstrings lengthen more too. So engage the quads as you hinge. Squeeze the glutes as you come up. Once you're feeling good with that one, guys, we're going to lower ourselves down towards the floor. So I'm going to sit on a box. You can use a chair or sofa. And again, exactly the same. I'm going to think about tilting my pelvis forwards more. I don't want to tuck my bum under. Okay, that's just going to make me round out. So sit up tall in the hips, tilt the pelvis forwards, hinge at the hips, feel those hamstrings, pull up on the quads. You can hold it for a bit here, adding some pauses in end range, and then come back up. You can move in and out of it, you can hold it. If that feels pretty easy, then move on to the next progression, which might be with a yoga block. So I can place a block under my bum. The idea is, once again, it's helping me to sit up tall in the hips so that I don't tuck my bum under. Sitting on the edge of the block, so you want to feel like you're almost falling off it. So it's sort of pulling the flesh out from underneath your seat bones, essentially, okay? And then from this position, as I'm sitting on the edge of that block, it's helping me to think about hinge rather than tuck and round. So think about your belly button pulling towards the floor. That way you'll keep your eyes up and you won't just round your back. So chest is open, belly button pulls to the floor, quads engage, and I can move in and out or I can hold it. So a bit of a mixture is fine. Once again, you shouldn't feel any pain. You might just be feeling tightness into the adductors, the inner thighs, the hamstrings. So just notice what's going on there. And we'll just spend 2 more minutes here. okay, before we come towards the end of this session. So a couple of minutes. You might feel like you want to hold it for a moment first, bit of a stretch, and then add some good mornings in. Another nice variation, one that I find nice, you might not like this one, but give it a go, is adding some lateral reaches. This feels really good to loosen off tension in your QL area into the lower back. So if I take one hand across my waist and reach the other arm away, and you can sort of add some holds here, maybe this bottom hand, you can bring it onto the floor, and you can just move side to side. You might be more flexible and able to reach for your foot, okay, but don't worry if you can't. The idea for this is that you're feeling that nice lateral side bend, which should feel good into the lower back and the hip, okay. So another minute, good mornings, holds and lateral bends. Mix it up as much as you like. You might find you don't need your yoga block anymore once you've warmed into it, but just make sure your bum doesn't tuck under. Another 30 seconds, guys, and then we'll come up. Okay, we're going to finish with a gentle twist. So for this one, you can shake your legs out. If you want to retest your squat or anything first, go for it. And I'll just show you what the movement is we're going to finish on. You can join in when you're ready. So I'm going to tuck one leg in, take the other over the top. Just feel a nice stretch into this outer hip. I'm hugging my front shin towards the chest. So I'm going to use my opposite arm to the leg that's on top to hug it in. And then turn towards the back shoulder. So if your right leg is on top, wrap your left arm around the front of it. If your left leg is on top, wrap your right arm around the front of it. And then just turn into that twist. So you should be feeling this into the outer glute and hip. And to sort of deepen it a little bit more, think about leading from your chest as you rotate. So you've got the mid upper back and neck is what's rotating there. Use your breath. So when you're rotating as far as you can go, take a breath in through your nose, fill up your lungs as much as you can. Then exhale, push the air out and see if you can twist a little bit deeper. And you can repeat that cycle, obviously. If it gets too much at any point, just loosen off and then go back in. Another 15 seconds here and then we'll switch. Okay, gently come out of that one and we'll do the same on the other side for another minute. Take the leg over the top. Use the opposite arm to hug it in nice and tight. And then let's add that twist, drawing the back shoulder back so we're opening, leading with the chest. And then using that breath, so inhaling through the nose, really filling up the lungs. And then exhale, twist a bit deeper. Okay, when you're ready, come back to the center, shake your legs out, retest your squat, and you're all done.